All right, so you're at the games. You've got somewhere between 2 to 4 events in a day, something like that. What are you doing between events? So let's say you just did a huge aerobic effort. You did an event one of this year's semifinals, which was 5 rounds, 800-meter run, 10 clean and jerks. You're done, you're smoked. How are you recovering? And then how are you prepping for the next event using all those tools that you like to use?
So I'm going to start by just kind of giving you my philosophy on recovery.
Okay.
And this applies to CrossFitters, but I think you could take this and apply it to pretty much any sport. And that is just that during competition, I want to get someone back to homeostasis, to baseline, as fast as possible. So you get done with that first workout, which was, for context for your audience, was 5 rounds. They would run 800 meters and they had 10 clean and jerks at 185. And for the women, it was 125. So it's not super heavy. It was a, moderate percentage of their 1 hour, but it was a 20 to 27 minute workout for most athletes. And for most of them, they were running outside, so it was hot, right? First thing that I would do is I would go get in the cold tub, right? Because I want to bring my body temperature back to baseline as quick as possible. Because one thing I've noticed about myself and with my athletes is that if you can get your body temperature back down after a workout, you start to feel better faster. And whether or not that results in performance improvement, it definitely results in confidence improvement in the next event. Because, wow, I feel so much better after that. The other thing that happens is when you're hot, you're not hungry, right? And one of the things that you have to do is you have to get fuel back into your body after, 27 minutes of basically operating well above your lactate threshold and then finishing for the last 2 minutes at VO2 max, most likely.
Yeah.
Right? So you need to get fuel back in the body. But if you're hot, you're not hungry, you're not going to want to eat or drink anything. So we go and we get in the cold tub, and that stimulates that hunger response and brings your body temperature back down. So then you can start getting nutrients in. And so I would, take in my carbs, a little bit of protein, keep the fats down so I could digest everything pretty quickly, right? So that's my basics. Then I would go straight back to the hotel room, assuming that I have time, and I'm going to try and get into my Normatec boots and flush the legs, especially since there would have been almost 5K, 4K of running workout and a whole bunch of clean and jerks. I want my legs to recover. If I didn't have the opportunity to do that, then I would go see the on-site massage therapist, manual therapists that are there, and have them do a whole body flush, right? Just try and get all that stale blood and lymph and all that stuff, all that metabolite flush back and, out of the limbs and being processed in the organs. So that would be the next thing. Then I always take a nap because your nervous system recovers when you sleep. So it doesn't matter if I'm still at the venue or if I'm back at the hotel, I take a 15-minute nap. And I have spent a ton of time practicing just these really short, brief power naps. It's not long enough to go into any deep sleep cycles. I can fall asleep super fast. Years ago, I read this book by a Navy SEAL, and they talked about the tricks that they taught them to fall asleep fast when they were in the field. And one of them was just relax your face. And I started trying it, and oh man, did it work. And I think I'm particularly suggestible to that kind of stuff. So I tried it and was just like, boom, and I was out.
Let me get a shot real quick. I want you to continue, but I want to talk about Normatec boots a lot and things of that nature. And I want to delineate here. So Normatec boots, compression therapy, something like that. There's not a whole lot of research behind it as far as giving you a physiological advantage. But what you're talking about here is really important. We're talking about calming the central nervous system. We're talking about calming the body down. So that is one thing that compression therapy, like pneumatic therapy, even putting a sleeve on, something as simple as putting a sleeve on your leg or something like that, it has a calming effect overall. And I'm right there with you. It's super important going into the next event, especially for the high-end athlete. We are talking about those 1% to 2% things.
Yeah, like I said, my goal is to get back to baseline as fast as possible. To get back, and it might be, activating the parasympathetic system, whatever you want to call it. I'm trying to get calmed down. And what I've noticed is that if people stay at this elevated, heightened state of readiness all the time for 4 days,
You're fried.
They're fried on day 2, right? And so it's not just that you're trying to recover physiologically, you're also trying to get you have all these tools to get yourself to just ramp down so that when you get there for the next event, you still have some adrenaline and everything to dump to go out and perform. And you're going to have to do that, you're going to have to sleep and do that again the next day and then sleep and do that again the next day. That's a lot of it. The other thing I've used a NIRS device, so it measures muscle oxygenation. I've used that with Normatec, and it's very interesting. It kind of looks like you're doing cyclical BFR. So you do have some temporary decreases in muscle oxygen saturation, just like if you were doing an IPC, a BFR IPC protocol. You have this slow decrease in muscle oxygenation, and then it releases the pressure and you get the, ischemic reperfusion that happens afterward. And I've noticed it does take longer. Like if I were to just use my BFR cuff, I can get those ischemic reperfusion hits very quickly. With the normals, you got to be in there for 20 minutes or 30 minutes to really get it. But I have measured it and seen the dips and the subsequent reoxygenation, and you get a reperfusion where there's a greater amount of oxygen that's in the tissue than there was previously. But again, it does take a longer period of time. But what I like about the Normatec boots versus BFR is BFR has to be pretty active.
Yeah.
And it's also it's painful.
Yeah. It's not a calming stimulus.
Yeah. And with Normatec, I can lay back and have a conversation with my family. I can turn something on. I can take a nap. I can kind of combine multiple things at once. So I found that to be a really good tool for that. Then ramping up for the next one would be, I like to use my Breathe Way Better. We talked about the balloon. It's a really simple concept. It's an ISO rebreather. So it's letting you capture some of the CO2 so that you can breathe at really high respiratory rates without, you and I right now were to set a metronome and breathe at 45 breaths per minute or 50 breaths per minute, which is what we're sustaining during CrossFit events or high intensity running events. We're breathing at 45, 50, 55 breaths per minute. If you were to just do that sitting here at rest, you pass out, right? You blow off all your CO2, boop, you go straight out. But you use this balloon, it's like a 3-liter balloon, and you're rebreathing the CO2, which keeps CO2 levels pretty static in the body, and you can breathe at really high respiration rates. So what it does, it allows you to warm up the respiratory system in a way that isn't fatiguing, right? So normally you'd have to do that. You have to get on a bike and really push the bike, or you'd have to go do some shuttle sprints or something like that to stimulate the respiratory system and warm it up, but it lets you do it without that. And what I found for CrossFitters is after they do, a 5-minute isocapnic warm up, man, they feel so much better going out to compete because it's, we want to do as much warm up as possible to be prepared to go out there and compete. But because of what we're doing, a lot of the movements are very muscularly demanding. So if you have someone doing a whole bunch of rope climbs and heavy deadlifts, you can only do so many of those in warm up. A lot of times you can't get to the respiratory rates that they're going to be touching when they're out on the floor without doing high intensity work. And if you have 3 workouts in a day and the next day 3 workouts in a day and the next day 3 workouts, well, guess what? You've now done all this extra warm up and high intensity work on top of what you're doing when you go out and compete, and you're just going to be tired by the end. So anything that lets us kind of sidestep fatigue.
Guys, I hope you're enjoying the video. If you are, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and ring that notification bell so you never miss out on any opportunities to enhance what moves you.
But still get a good warm-up stimulus. BFR is a great example of that here. Doing IPC before events will get people prepared and less fatigued by day 3. It's really not just about is this what's going to optimally prepare you for this one event?
Yeah.
You have to look at the whole course of a weekend or the CrossFit Games, maybe 5 days of competition, which encompasses 16 events. Man, if you are getting up to those super high intensities for warm up every time, people are just going to be absolutely trashed by event 16.
Yep.
So we're doing things like Breathe Way Better that help them, warm up their respiratory system quickly using BFR IPC pre-event.
How would you compare the Breathe Way Better to? Are you familiar with the Wim Hof method of breathing?
Yeah. So Wim Hof, what happens with a Wim Hof is you're taking these full breaths and you're doing big, long, full breaths, but you're never really hitting super high respiration rates. It's fast, but if you hit 60 breaths per minute doing Wim Hof, you're going to pass out.
Yeah.
It's a similar concept. You could probably use that to warm up the respiratory system, but also using not muscle oxygen sensors, but a SpO2 monitor. I've seen my blood oxygen saturation down around 80 or 82. Yeah. So that's true altitude type response. And again, we're trying to avoid fatigue. And after you get yourself low enough doing Wim Hof, man, there is just a period of time afterward where I wouldn't want to compete. You don't feel like...
Have you tested that with the Breathe Way Better to see where it is?
Yeah, you can. So there are ways to manipulate the Breathe Way Better to get your SpO2 extremely low.
Yeah.
But using the way we use it for warm up, we're not getting SpO2 levels low at all. What we're trying to do is actually build up a little bit of systemic carbon dioxide, which is a vasodilator. I mean, it's something that you go out and you do one hard effort on like an assault bike or an echo bike, and you're going to desaturate quickly. You're going to build up a whole bunch of CO2. It's going to, let oxygen start to, you're familiar with the oxygen dissociation curve, hemoglobin dissociation. Yeah. So it makes that CO2 elevation, makes hemoglobin less sticky and release its oxygen a little bit better. It's part of warming up. You have to do it. But we can kind of capture that with a breathe way better without having to do some of that sprinting and things like that. So it's a hack. It's a cool little hack. And I think it's not new. If you look at, like you said, you dug into some of the research on it. The military has been looking into isocapnic training since like 1996. So there's
a lot of the research is coming from the military on this. Yeah.
And they're using it with divers doing rebreathing and things like that. So there's some really cool stuff people are just now starting to use it for sport performance in the last 5-6 years. There was a device a couple years back called the Spiro Tiger, which was $1,000. And it was like the first commercially available isocapnic trainer. And it had like a little onboard computer to tell you if you're breathing enough and the metronome and all this stuff. So it's been around. That was probably circa 2014, 2015 when they produced that. It was just too expensive to see it starting to get in the hands of everyday or more recreational style athletes like CrossFitters are. But people like Tour de France racers and stuff, they've been using these things for years. They're just not advertising it to everybody because, well, the fewer of their competitors that know about it, the better for them, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I said the same thing about BFR whenever it first came out. I was like, man, is this going to be something that they make illegal at some point because of what it's able to do from a hormone standpoint? It's just been phenomenal. But then we talked about, what are some of the things we talked about? The cooling gloves, which we haven't seen. I know you and I both talked about this. We haven't seen as much research in years.
I'm not a huge fan of them. We had some at Training Think Tank. We had a chance to use them, and I didn't notice any. There was not even me going into it, having read the research, there should have been a placebo. I didn't feel anything from using the cooling gloves.
Yeah.
With that being said, there's definitely some good, strong evidence for pre-cooling, especially for hot endurance events. I've tried that with just using an ice vest before events, and that definitely...
You talked about that. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think basically the concept is that you're going to lower your core temperature by a degree or two. So it gives you just a longer runway till you get to that critical, I think it's called compensatory heat point, where basically your body can't offload heat fast enough. It just gives you a little bit longer before you get to that point. I would love to test out an ice bath before something like that. I just haven't had the guts to do it yet before a real competitive event. Plus, I hate honestly, I'm telling you, I get in the ice bath after an event, but I couldn't imagine something worse than getting in there before I'm hot already. It's great when you're on fire after, a tough workout, but getting in there before you go out to compete, I don't know.
I know. Yeah.